Today I'm here in Kibbutz Degania Bet in the beautiful Jordan Valley, and I'm talking to Daniel Bet Sefer, who lives in Australia, but once upon a time he used to live here and he was a member here. So first of all, in a few words, Daniel, tell the people in the channel your background. Where were you born and how did you get to Israel?
Okay, I was born in Colombia, in South America.
Okay.
And I came to Israel in 1972, and my parents thought that being 18, it was time to do a trip with me and my sister to Israel. And the problem was that my holidays from university didn't match the holidays from the rest of the family. So my father decided to solve the problem. I would come to Israel 1 month earlier and work in a kibbutz for a month. And I thought he must be crazy working a holiday. But that was the solution. So I stayed in a kibbutz not that far from here called Hakuk, on the other side of the Kinneret.
The Sea of Galilee, yes.
Of the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with kibbutz life, and I just didn't want to go back, which didn't meet big approval from my parents, who insisted that I should finish my degree first, and then I could do whatever I wanted.
What was your degree?
I had a BA in mathematics, which entitled me to become a teacher. And that was my job during the 15 years I lived here.
So after you finished the university, did you come immediately to Israel, to Degania Bet?
Yes, kind of. Before coming, I met with two other friends and we said, okay, let's go and do our aliyah together, the three of us. Let's do a trip. Let's first go and travel South America, then take a boat to Europe, travel Europe, and then come to Israel, and we'll arrange it so that we're always in summertime. So we'll go to South America when it's summer, then when it gets colder, we'll go to Europe when it's summer there, and then come to Israel. And we said, okay, each one of us will now ask our parents if that's a good idea, and if they approve, and if they can help a little bit with money. I went to my parents, and my parents loved the idea. They thought it was educational and a good way of starting my new life.
So they backed you up with your idea after university, after you had a profession, that you could spend time in Israel. Did they think, or did you ever tell them that you intended to stay in Israel?
Yeah, it was fixed. I was coming to a kibbutz. I went to the Shaliach in Colombia and
the envoy of the Jewish agency, the Shaliach.
Shaliach. I went to him and I said, look, I want you to send me to a kibbutz. I want one that is not religious but has a synagogue, because I was a little bit traditionally religious at the time. And I want to be going to a kibbutz where nobody speaks Spanish. And the reason for that was that in the kibbutz I volunteered in, half of the population was Spanish speaking.
That was in Kibbutz Hakuk.
In Kibbutz Hakuk.
Which is also by the Sea of Galilee, okay.
And I felt that if I came here and I told people that I didn't speak any English, only Spanish, that people would talk to me in Hebrew and it would force me to learn the language faster.
I see. So how long did it take you to become fluent in Hebrew?
So when I arrived in Israel, I was sent to an Ulpan Bat Kalim in Lower Haifa.
Okay, the Ulpan is the Hebrew language course, okay.
Yeah, it was intensive. I think it was 3 months, 6 months, I don't remember anymore. And then during that time, I would come weekends already to the kibbutz. I was, somebody mentioned it as I was a candidate to become a member.
I've got you. So let me understand you. The languages you spoke before you came here were English, Spanish,
And the first language was German, which was spoken at home by my parents.
I see. Okay, so your parents came originally from Germany when in the
39.
They got out in time.
They just got out in time at the last moment.
I
In the
see.
case of my father, the Gestapo came to look for them the afternoon after they left.
That was very, very close.
I wouldn't be here.
A very close call.
Yeah.
And when you asked to find a kibbutz, they presented you the Jewish agency or the Ulpan department?
So as I said before, I went to the Jewish agency Shaliach,
The envoy?
the
Yes.
envoy, and I said I want a kibbutz with no Spanish speaker, that has a synagogue, that is not religious. And he said, you know what? The kibbutz of my wife matches all of your conditions, and he sent me to Degania Bet.
So his wife was born here in
His wife
Degania
was
Bet?
born here.
Okay.
Mitzi Ben Arzi, I don't know if you know her.
No,
She
but
was
anyway.
she was living in Colombia. You wouldn't know.
Okay. What were your first impressions of Degania Bet?
Paradise. Paradise.
Paradise. How old were you?
22. I came to Degania Bet the first time. They told me you have to look for a man called Uzi Ben Shalom. He's the principal of the school. I was going to be a teacher here. And I came to Kibbutz. And somebody gave me a lift from Degania Aleph into Degania Bet.
Which is only 800 meters from the shore.
And we just met him outside Malachi.
Ah, Malachi, yes.
He gave me my ride and he said, look, don't go to Uzi's house till after 3 o'clock because now is siesta time and nobody will be awake.
Okay.
So I walked around the kibbutz and I couldn't believe this would be the place I'm going to live at.
When
It
you-
was so beautiful.
So now, okay. So describe your feelings. You said it was paradise. What was beautiful about the kibbutz?
The palm trees, the fact that you didn't see any cars in the city, in the village
In the middle of the.
The swimming pool was beautiful. It was peaceful and quiet while everybody was sleeping. For me, it looked like incredible. It looked
Well,
unbelievable.
okay, those were your impressions of paradise. What did you tell your parents? Or I presume
I
you
don't
phoned them
remember.
or you wrote to them,
You didn't.
email in those
You
days?
couldn't phone in those days.
No phone. There was no private phones.
No, you could call overseas using a public phone, and it would cost
What year was that?
1975.
I see.
You couldn't call. You could send a letter, and you got an answer 2 weeks later. It took 2 weeks for the letter to get there, and then 2 weeks for an answer to come. So you were always like a month behind.
Okay.
So what did I tell my parents? I don't remember.
All right. Okay. So you, what was your first job in the kibbutz?
My first job in the kibbutz.
You know, you came with a university degree. Did you
Yeah,
expect?
The first job was working in the bananas.
I see.
And
Okay.
I was told if you want to make it in this kibbutz, you have to either work in bananas or in the cow shed.
In the cow sheds. Okay. Physical work.
Physical work.
And let's say, put your degree on one side.
Yeah.
Or did you choose?
Well, they didn't let me choose. They sent me to the bananas.
I see. And did you like it in the bananas?
No.
Why? Why not?
Because they had these gigantic bunches of bananas.
About
that you had to-
30
You had
kilos.
to carry like that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't strong enough.
Well, how many days or how many weeks did you last?
I lasted 1 day.
1 day, okay, fine.
And the following day I was sent to the cowshed.
So you went to work in the cowshed. Do you remember how big the cowshed was? How many milkers? What you had to do?
The cowshed, and I think still is the same, had about 400 cows to milk. And you had 3 shifts, one at 3 in the morning, one at lunchtime, one in the evening. And you did 1 shift a day, and also you worked with the hay and doing all sorts of.
So it's all highly skilled work, making sure that they gave the right amount of milk at the right time and the feeding.
Well, as far as I remember, all I knew was you had to first extract a little bit of milk from each one of the tits.
By hand, you had to squeeze. Okay.
And you had to wash them first, and then squeeze a little bit of milk out, and then pump, put
you put the
machines on.
You put the machine pumps suction caps.
So first you had to walk the cows into the
corral or the
milking parlor.
Yeah.
And then you had to then do what I just said, and it was good fun. I really liked it.
How long did you work in the cowsheds?
Well, this was while I was doing the ulpan and just before school.
While you were learning Hebrew.
Oh yeah. So I came, I think, around September. I came around Yom Kippur. And so September, let's say September, October, November, I was learning Hebrew in Haifa, and I would come whenever I could. And then probably a month I worked in the cowshed, and until January, February, when the school started, or I started teaching in school.
So from the time you landed in the kibbutz to the time you started teaching, how many months was that?
Good question. I don't remember.
All right, I have a guess. Was it a year or 6 months?
No, I'm puzzled now because school here started in August.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they put me in that year or the next year, or if I started mid-year.
All right.
Honestly, I don't remember anymore.
The point I want to make...
I want to make a point. This was 40 years ago. Okay?
Yeah, 40 years ago.
Nearly 50 years ago. So.
Okay, but you look so young. I thought you just had your bar mitzvah.
Yeah, my 3rd bar mitzvah maybe.
What I'm trying to understand is, how did you feel in terms of confidence to stand in front of a class of native Hebrew speakers after you'd only been in the country for maybe a year, maybe, I don't know.
Okay, it was definitely less than a year.
Yeah.
It was a situation where I was a teacher that had never taught children before. It wasn't just children, it was Israeli children.
Okay.
It wasn't just Israeli children, it was kibbutz children.
Okay, so what difficulties or challenges presented themselves to you?
First challenge, a boy comes to me after dinner. After dinner you would sit outside the dining room. The boy, Kita Zayin, 7th grade, about 12 years old, and he said, you know what? Our class is famous, and it's so famous that one of our female teachers just had an abortion because of us.
I see, so you landed in hell. It wasn't paradise.
It wasn't paradise. It wasn't paradise.
I see.
It was a very difficult year.
The first
frustrating
year.
New teacher.
You hadn't been trained as a teacher.
No, I was trained as a teacher.
As a teacher with mathematics as your subject.
Yeah, I had been trained in Colombia as a teacher.
I see.
And I think let's come forward to now, where I walk into the kibbutz today and my old students come and give me a hug and say
After 40, 45 years.
I was the best teacher they ever had. So
well, you know, there's nothing better than that.
This morning we met one of them.
I see. So, well, you know, as they say, flattery will get you everywhere. How would you describe, so all of the years you taught maths in the high school here while you...
I taught in primary school.
Primary school.
Which is harder than teaching high school.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the age, 13, 14-year-olds, it's a very difficult age to teach. Because
so you taught in the middle school? Middle school?
No.
Chativat Beinaim.
The school system here was that from 1st to 8th was primary school.
I see.
And from 9th to 12th was the high school.
I've got you. In those days.
I taught in the primary school, which was in the Degania Bet, the neighboring kibbutz, and I used to go by bike every morning.
Mm-hmm. Kibbutz is a 24-hour, 24/7 society whereby they know you outside of school as well. How was the relationship between you and the kids, both as school teacher and known by them at home?
At the beginning, it was difficult. There was lots of tension because I didn't know how to discipline them. I was trying to be their friend instead of the teacher.
Big
I
mistake.
did
Big mistake.
I did quite a lot of mistakes that new teachers do anyhow. Yeah. And being kibbutz kids, it only went bad. The second year I learned to, and I don't know if I'll tell you later because something that happened this morning.
You can tell me now and I'll edit it out of the channel. I will edit it.
This morning we went on a chariot cart ride.
We went out in nature, off the beaten track, in electric vehicles to tour around the Jordan Valley.
That's right.
Today I'm in the Jordan Valley, leaving Kibbutz Kinneret with Uri Sharet, whose business is taking people out on tours on the electric vehicle buggies in the Jordan Valley. So Uri, just smile at the camera. Hello, take your glasses off so we can see you. Uri, tell me, just a little bit of information. Where were you born?
I'm a third generation from Degania Bet. My mom born in Degania, and I remember my grandpa Yosef.
Yeah.
He came from Russia, Poland, I don't know.
I see.
He changed his name from Sochovolsky to Ben Hagai.
Ben Hagai.
It means the valley son of the valley.
Son of the valley.
אז כאן הייתי יוצא פה עם מרכבות סוסים, והמסלול היה פה לאורך הירדן, שזה אחד מהרבה כפרים שהם קנו פה בעמק הירדן.
יאללה, ואז אני אביא לג'וינט, יאללה.
And the person that runs that business was a pupil of mine.
Uri was a pupil of yours. How many years did you teach here in the kibbutz?
Okay, so I taught in the primary school, I taught for nearly 10 years. That included also the year and a half I was in the army. Mm-hmm. So it was approximately 10 years of primary school. Then I was in the army for a year and a half, and then I did 4 years in the high school. Mm-hmm. Now, towards the end of the time I was in the primary school, it was the mid-80s, and they started introducing computers to schools. And then it became natural that the mathematics teachers would become the computer teachers. and me being the one of the main mathematical teachers in the whole Jordan Valley, I was given the assignment of introducing computers to all of the schools in the area, including the high school.
Okay, I understand.
So on top of being math teacher, I was computer teacher, and I was the person to solve the problems in any of the other schools when they had a problem with computers.
I've got you. Right. Looking back on those days, how did you see the kibbutz? What did you learn new about the kibbutz after your first impressions of paradise?
Okay.
What was it paradise?
Yes, it was paradise. I lived in a tiny little room, but I was happy.
Yeah.
I learned here that you can be happy without having money, without being concerned about money. You went and you did your job, you contributed, you had your rights as a kibbutz member, but you didn't want more than what you had. That made me happy.
So your own personal demands of yourself were not very high in terms of what you get yourself, but your feeling within the community.
My feeling within the community, to the point that even now that I come, I left the kibbutz 30 years later, and I come to this place and people greet me with
13 years later.
30 years later. I left in 1990.
Ah,
32
30
years later.
34 years you were in this kibbutz.
No, I was in the kibbutz 15 years, and I left 32 years ago.
I've got you.
And 32 years ago, people still consider me as being a part of their lives.
You said, again, I reminded you, it was paradise. So why did you leave? I mean, you don't have to go into too many personal details, but just in a nutshell.
Why did I leave? There were many reasons for leaving. One was that in the meantime I had married. My wife was a nurse here. In those times, the life of a nurse was not easy. She would be called at 2 in the morning for an emergency and all sorts of other things.
So again, a 24/7 society with demands made on the individual.
Yeah, and to be honest, you either were born a kibbutznik or you were not born a kibbutznik.
So you either had that character or you didn't.
I feel she wasn't. She wasn't happy here. Then you
She wasn't born here.
No, she was an American.
I see. Okay. All right. That's one reason. What were the other two reasons?
The kibbutz movement was at the time going through a financial crisis that was causing a social crisis, and it was causing many good people to leave the kibbutz.
You weren't the only one person to leave at that time in the 1990s.
Late 1980s, 1990.
Mm-hmm.
Also we could see that young people, that beforehand a young person would leave the army, they would get married, and either they would come to his kibbutz or go to her kibbutz, but you always had young people joining the kibbutz, and that had stopped.
So there was a large turnover of people, and then you got to a time where more people were leaving than coming in.
There were no people coming in.
No people. What do you attribute the reasons for that, for the financial crisis?
Well, the financial crisis was caused, to start with the Likud getting to power.
The right-wing
right-wing, before that,
under Begin.
The kibbutz were protected by the left-wing government.
I see.
And once Begin came to power, they lost the kibbutz movement went into crisis. There also was a financial collapse, if you remember, big inflation. Kibbutzim got into trouble financially. Better kibbutzim that were better off had to help kibbutzim that weren't that well off. And actually, the Degania Bet was, with all the problems it had, was helping other kibbutzim at the time. And it was a little bit depressing to see friends and people you were admiring and people you considered that's a typical kibbutznik suddenly picking up their bags and leaving. Then the other two reasons were my parents were in Colombia, and you probably have all heard about Pablo Escobar.
Escobar, the drug king.
Colombia was not a safe place to be. And my sister, 10 years before, had emigrated to Australia. And I thought that by being together with my sister, it would entice my parents to leave Colombia and join us.
Okay, so you moved at the same time, or around about the same time, to Australia?
So I moved to Australia, trying to convince them to join, to move to Australia too.
How long have you lived in Australia?
32 years.
32 years. You've been back now, I think, a number of times to your kibbutz here in Degania Bet.
Yeah.
Okay. What changes do you see?
Well, it's not the kibbutz that used to be. It's probably people will say it's not the kibbutz anymore.
I've heard that too.
But it had to happen. It's happened to other kibbutzim. And actually, I would say that the Degania Bet probably was one of the last ones to convert to a private town or whatever you want to call it.
Differential salaries.
Differential salaries, privatization.
I wouldn't call it privatization, but that's my view. Very simply because all public assets are still owned by the kibbutz and not by the individual members. All right. How do you view the kibbutz now? Do you think it's better than it was, or is it a matter of maturation and development and going through different cycles of life? Like a person goes through, he's born, he grows up, he's an adolescent, he becomes mature, then he becomes old. How do you see this development or change in kibbutzim?
Well, I used to say I would love to go back to the kibbutz because I loved kibbutz life. I would like to go back to the kibbutz, but the way it was in the 70s and the 80s. It has changed and probably gone through what you just described. But this trip I'm here now, even though there has been a major change, I have the feeling people are happy.
Yeah. Well, we just met for lunch Matty, who is 84?
86, I think.
86, yeah. I mean, if you had the choice with your wife now, your second wife, if there was a possibility, would you change your lifestyle? I don't know what your lifestyle is in Australia for the kibbutz. I'm sorry to ask you these difficult questions.
It's really a difficult question.
Okay, I mean, is it a different paradise now? Is it still attractive to you? Or what would you be giving up if you decided you wanted to be in the kibbutz?
I would be giving up a lot. Maybe if I had been alone, I would not hesitate. My heart always has been here, to the point.
So your emotional peg is here.
My emotional peg is here. Even though I don't live here, I feel this is my home. to the point that probably 10 years ago or so, I actually bought the right to be buried in Degania Bet.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. Interesting.
And I'll tell you a story why. I go to the cemetery in Australia,
Yeah.
and I hardly know anybody there.
Yeah.
Maybe here and there. My father is buried there,
Yeah.
and a few friends are buried there, but there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tombstones, and I have no idea who they are, where, whatever. I don't know their families, nothing. Now I go to the cemetery here, and I either knew the person, or I heard about the person, or I thought that person's children or grandchildren. Nearly every tombstone here, I have a connection with.
Wow.
So if I had to lay a stone on, if I had to take stones to this cemetery here in Degania Bet, it probably, I would need a big bag. So I ask you, where's home?
Where's home? Well, you know, I know the cemetery here. The cemetery is located in a fantastic position.
It's a beautiful place.
Overlooking it's on a hillside overlooking the valley that we just traveled through in the electric vehicles and the buggies, by opposite Abu Dir, the prehistoric mound, the River Jordan. Beautiful location.
And I'll be with friends.
You'll be with friends.
And
I don't know how the conversation will be.
and people will come and say, oh, here
lies Daniel.
Here lies Daniel, my teacher or whatever, and who the
So
hell will come in Australia to see me?
In a way, it's like deciding on what your legacy is. That you know that after you have passed, there are people who will remember you. It's a fantastic feeling. It's an absolutely wonderful feeling of being in a place forever where people knew you and loved you and appreciated you. And then your children hopefully can visit here, and those people who will remember you will talk to your children and tell them how you were. What a marvelous feeling of community.
Mm-hmm.
What can I say? Thank you for this little conversation. It led us in a different direction from what I thought, but that's a wonderful feeling of the, how can I say, the wholeness and the continuity of kibbutz, even after you've passed. Very interesting view. Thank you very much indeed. I'm very happy Daniel Bet Sefer visiting in Degania Bet from Australia.
And originally from Colombia.
And speaking how many? 5 languages?
Yeah.
And you're retired?
Happily retired.
Happily retired. So you trained and taught as a maths teacher. What are you doing? What were you doing in Australia before you retired?
In Australia, I became a computer language teacher, and then I became a programmer and IT manager, and then a senior systems developer, which was a nice name for being a senior programmer.
I see.
And then I loved my work, but I love not working even more.
I completely agree with you that retirement is the best job I've ever had. No alarm clock.
The only problem with being retired is you don't get days off.
Yes, well, I think my late brother said, the hours are fantastic. The pay isn't too good. But all right, well, thank you very much, Daniel. And
I want you now to ask me a question.
okay.
What what makes kibbutz special. I want to talk about how democratic the kibbutz movement.
Okay, well, let me just think for a moment. You know what? I have an idea. What makes a kibbutz very special?
A kibbutz is a very special society in the sense that it is the closest that you can get to a full democracy. At least a kibbutz when I was here.
Okay.
Because while in a democracy you vote for somebody to represent you, in the kibbutz, every member is a member of parliament. And every member has the right to vote and to talk and try to convince other people at the weekly or fortnightly General Assembly, and has the possibility of influencing and deciding how the kibbutz will continue in the future. And I feel that in the whole world, there is no place that is more democratic than in the kibbutz.
Well, let me try to analyze that and see perhaps what the pitfalls and problems of that, so that anybody, no matter what their background, I'm talking about any member, no matter what their background or profession or knowledge or intellect or anything else, he can have his say. What happens if the majority of people decide, I mean, take for example an issue such as building policy or housing. If the majority of people say, well, you know, we don't want a major highway running through the middle of the kibbutz, or we need a perimeter around the kibbutz with a fence, and many of these people are not professionals in construction, and they don't understand the financing of this. How do you see that functioning, either with that example or something else?
Well, obviously there were things that it's exactly what you were saying. We had decisions where people deciding had no idea what they were deciding on. It's a pitfall, but to tell you the truth, even in the government in England and the government in Britain and the government in Australia and the government in Israel, there also are people that are in their respective parliaments that have no idea what they're talking about.
In other words, they're talking a load of BS.
So, but at least in the kibbutz, you're doing it for yourself, and you're doing it for your neighbor, and you really are taking an interest in what's happening to your own life.
It's direct,
it's
immediate.
Yeah.
Geography means that a lot, probably communication is a lot better.
Yeah. And we had discussions in the General Assembly, and somebody would say, we should have A, B, C, D, and somebody else would say, yeah, that sounds a great idea, but we have a budget, we decided on a budget. Now you tell me, if we're going to do your A, B, C, D, what item of the budget are we going to take away? And then it made that other person think, okay, maybe I'll present it next year when budget time comes, and I'll throw my idea in, and that can then be discussed and decided on. But there were cases, like at the time we had a big General Assembly deciding if people should be entitled to get the color TV from the kibbutz.
Okay.
And although I was part of the secretariat.
I see. So
we
you're in the center of things.
We didn't really want to have everybody have a color TV because it was quite an expense.
Yes.
That General Assembly suddenly was full of people, usually not.
Yeah, so you know there were 90% attendance that night.
And they voted everybody should get a color TV.
Yeah.
Eventually we got the color TV at the expense of something else that didn't get paid for. That.
Okay, you've now led me to another direction. Nowadays, there is a lot less how can I say, centrality or importance of the old kibbutz, whereby committees decided after a public meeting and then it goes down to a committee. How do you see the development here now, where people are much more focused on their own personal ambitions at home? Do you see a difference between that or the way the kibbutz was once governed?
Well, I don't know enough about how the kibbutz is run today.
Okay.
I've
fair
been
enough.
here only 2 or 3 days, but
you're
you're
an intelligent guy.
But I see my host here. She looks at her phone, and she belongs to a WhatsApp group where all of the kibbutz members are members of, and there she's able to go on live, sit at home and see the General Assembly happen live on her phone.
On a closed circuit television.
And then they have a ballot by phone. So we wouldn't even dream of those things in those
And in the
times.
old days, maybe when they had the General Assembly, maybe 100 people or so would sit together.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you see it via the phone or via television.
Yeah, and if you missed it, then the following day someone will tell you, voting is on, you better vote. So it's a completely different world now.
Yeah. Both technologically but still,
Ideologically.
do you find still that there is a community spirit?
I think so, yes. But I can't vouch for it because I don't know enough.
Yeah. No.
But, well, you know what? I came here, and in the evening was the festival of Shavuot.
Yes, the
which
Harvest
is
Festival. Yeah.
The Harvest Festival, which for kibbutz then and now is of high significance. And the party they had here was unique, and it was very similar to the parties we had in those times. And it was a community effort to get the show going, and there was dancing and participation, and it really was fantastic. And it was like in the good old days, and it just proves that it is a community living. And I've seen movies of all the other festivals here in Degania Bet, and you can see that the spirit of community and of doing things together still carries on.
Okay, well that's fantastic. I'm happy to hear you say this. I'm glad you feel this way. And all I can say is thank you very much for this little conversation.
You're welcome.
And I hope that when we moved our feet on the carpet, it didn't move the bloody camera.
It did. I moved it back.
Hold on, no, you're still in focus.
I could see that I was in focus.
Yeah.